It was diabolically clever. We're here 23 years later and we've got no idea what happened to Rachelle.
We have a 23-year-old who works at a car yard. She's been murdered. Why would you jump to bikies?
Welcome to the 5th update episode of Dear Rachelle, your behind-the-scenes access to this live podcast investigation series. I'm your host, Ashlea Hansen. In this bonus episode, we're taking you behind the headlines and introducing some of the journalists who've been working on this case with me. Patrick Carlyon is a senior features writer for News Corp, and Charlotte Karp is a senior reporter. They're part of our core team investigating the unsolved murder of Rachelle Childs. This is our chance to dive a little deeper into the journalism behind the case. Welcome to you both. I'll start with you, Patrick. You've been to some of these key locations. How do you compare the Jirowa scene, which is the scene where Rachelle's body was found, when you went there during the day as opposed to night? Yeah,
look, that's a good question, Ash. I think I was with you and Reese, our producer, when we got there about 2:30am one night back in December. And I was sort of standing there for about half an hour before you got there. And the place felt haunted. There was not a car that passed. And this is the same time that Rachelle's body was found on fire back in 2001. Not a single car passed. I had the car headlights on. You could hear the surf in the distance. And you could see the insects sort of dancing in the car headlights. And it felt haunted, to be honest. Whereas during the day, there's people around, there's a caravan park nearby. It's a pretty town, Jirowa. It's a wonderful beach spot. But at 2:20 in the morning, standing there by yourself in the middle of nowhere, it really does feel cursed, to be honest, in the context of Rachelle's case.
And the darkness is just so memorable about how dark it is there, and I guess we talk about this all the time. Why that spot? Why did the killer choose that spot to dispose of Rachelle's body? We're just trying to piece together what happened to Rachelle and those missing 9 hours that we constantly talk about. What goes into your mind when you think about that area?
Look, it doesn't sort of make sense, does it? Look, I've been looking at this since August last year, and that's one of the questions that keeps me awake at night is why was she left there burning? I mean, it's such a dreadful fate. It is just so off the charts. And look, we don't know anything about her last 9 hours, and that keeps me awake as well. But why choose the side of the road? Why put someone, set someone on fire when there's all this scrubland and bush where you could place a body that wouldn't be found for months and months? You've got, tens of kilometres of bushland around you. But Rachelle is placed on the side of the road and set on fire in a way that she was going to be, obviously found fairly readily. She was put on top of a concrete tank. Was the killer planning to open the tank and put her in there and change his mind? It doesn't make sense. None of it makes sense.
It is a disturbing crime. Charlotte, what keeps you up at night researching this case and working on it?
Why did they choose her? Why? What happened in the car? Did she drive this person down to Jirowa? Was she driven? I mean, what happened in the car? That's what I would love to know.
Yeah, we all want to know that question. Or did it happen in the car? Because as I've spoken to Patrick a lot about as well, we don't even know where she died, where this fatal encounter was.
Exactly.
It could have been inside. It could have been in a car. It could have been at her house. It could have been at another location we don't know about because, as we always come back to, those missing 9 hours. What about the Bargo Hotel and her car being parked there by somebody else? What have you thought is some of the scenarios you've thought about as to when maybe that car could have been planted there?
My impression is that it was probably planted there sometime in the morning when her body was on fire down near Jirowa, that they've come back and they've planted her car there. That's, to me, what makes sense.
It does make a lot of sense, but the question I keep coming back to is then how did the killer get away from that area? So did they walk? Did they catch a taxi? Did somebody pick them up? Was his car parked conveniently nearby? Was this all part of the plan? What do you think, Patrick?
Look, I think there's a plan that we don't understand. And I mean, there are so many elements to that plan. If you accept there was a plan, and I think there was a plan, it was diabolically clever in the sense that we're here 23 years later and we've got no idea what happened to Rachelle between 5:15 when she left work, and I think she was caught, flicking a cigarette butt out of her car window as she was driving towards home, and 2:20 a.m. And that drives me bonkers, to be honest. And you and I have talked about this so dozens and dozens and dozens of times. How about if we think about this? How about if we think about that? I remember when I started looking at this, the impression was that Rachelle had been to the Bargo Hotel. And that was sort of, if you go back through the clippings from 2001, that was an accepted fact. And even that, to me, doesn't sound right. She didn't go to the Bargo Hotel, as far as I can see. But there's all these distractions, there's all these red herrings sort of through this entire story that goes to that 9 hours. And we cannot actually decipher what happened even now. We've spent months and months of looking at this. There's been police investigations and reviews and coronial inquests, and we're still no closer to actually having facts about those last 9 hours. And that's what I anguish about when I think about Rachelle, is what the hell happened? We don't even know how she died. We don't know where she died. It beggars belief that this story about this wonderful person who everybody loved was inexplicably killed. It beggars belief that we don't know anything about her final hours.
Just defies belief, doesn't it? And I know that keeps me up at night as well, thinking about not just what happened to her, but also that this person is still free, or the offenders are still free. So that's a scary thought. And you just think about, what did his life go on to be? I know I've thought about that a lot. So let's talk about some of the points that you just made there about the Bargo Hotel and those red herrings in the beginning. The bikies rumour that started very quickly, and we've published a story which is about the manager at Campbelltown Holden, who said that Kevin Carell, who was Rachelle's boss at the time, was peddling this story as soon as the Monday, the public holiday of the June long weekend, when the family only was informed on the Sunday that Rachelle's body had been found and they were treating her death as a murder. And then on the Monday, so soon after, Kevin's peddling this story that bikies were involved. What's your reaction to that, Charlotte?
I think it's a very strange way to react to that kind of thing. I mean, we have a 23-year-old who works at a car yard. She's been murdered. Why would you jump to bikies? It's just such a strange conclusion to get to. And with almost no evidence, really. I mean, she was friends with, but it was also a very small town, and I would say a lot of people knew a lot of people. So, yeah, it's a very strange conclusion to come to.
That's one thing I'm really proud of, I guess, that we've been able to dismantle that rumour. You know, we've been able to crush it, because there are so many people that testify that Rachelle wasn't involved with bikies. What are your thoughts on that, Patrick?
Oh, look, what struck me when looking at this, when you look at Sash, who was one of the bikies and was heavily investigated, and he said to the investigators in one of those very early interviews, "Stop wasting your time. It wasn't me. It's nothing to do with us. Go and find who did this." That bikie rumour took hold, and it distracted that initial investigation in a massive way, and it was a complete waste of time. It was very unfair to the reputation and of Rachelle. It sort of suggested that she was somehow up to no good. Now, we know for a fact she was 23, she was popular, she was on her way in life. She hadn't quite worked out where she was going to go. She was a great human being. Even under all this scrutiny that we've applied and the police applied, she was a nice person. She had nothing to do with bikies. She was she wasn't up to no good. She was a good person. But this rumour, sort of this distraction, took hold in such a massive way, and it distracted the investigation for years and years.
It is a complex case. There were multiple crime scenes. The Bargo Hotel, which is where her car was staged and parked by somebody else, that obviously became a crime scene. Her car was an exhibit. Then you have Giroa. Then you have her workplace over at Camden where she was last seen alive, leaving work. So many key locations. And just on that, I know that, Patrick, you've visited a lot of those spots with me along the way as well. And with Tamor, how does that play into it? Because you went there to look into this alibi of Kevin Stephen Carell, who was Rachelle's boss at the time at Camden Holden. He, of course, has strenuously denied any involvement in Rachelle's murder, and he willingly participated in 3 records of interview with police and provided his DNA voluntarily, and the coroner made an open finding. So in terms of Kevin's alibi, he says that he went to Tamor to get fish and chips. What do you make of that point in his alibi?
Kevin offered a very complicated alibi. It basically had him driving from Camden to Campbelltown to another shopping centre, then down to Picton, then down to Tamor, then back to Picton, then back to Camden. He talked about going to Tamor to get fish and chips. Now, that was striking, and it struck the police officers at the time, because what his order, he said he remembered his order 2 weeks later. I think he gave that alibi after Rachelle was murdered, and he remembered his order, which involved, I think, a battered salve and chips and a can of Coke. And it was almost the same order as he gave as an alibi to a sexual assault allegation back in the early 1980s. Look, what struck me about his alibi, and you look at the fish and chip shop, why weren't the police going to the fish and chip shop sort of immediately sort of saying, do you remember Kevin, this man being here on this night at this time? And all of that kind of evidence got lost because that grunt work, that slog work of police actually canvassing people and sort of saying, he says he was here then. Can you prove, is there CCTV? Can you remember him? A lot of that work went undone in those early days and weeks, and it got lost. All that evidence got lost. And here we are 23 years later, still looking at this alibi, which is very involved, and sort of saying, how come this can't be proven or disproven? And I mean, that drives me mad. I mean, that's critical to this whole story. Can that alibi be proven or not? And it seems very unlikely that we can, short of having some sort of breakthrough, which hopefully we do, actually get to the point of understanding where that alibi may have been true or may not have been true. That's another thing that drives me mad.
As we investigate Kevin Carell and his past, one thing that keeps popping up is mingles. Charlotte, you've been looking into this. What is mingles?
Mingles was like a singles group, I guess. We'll call it a singles group that sort of ran in like the early 2000s. And from what I gather, I mean, it was run by one person and she just wanted people to have fun. She ran these huge events, usually at RSLs around Southwest Sydney, and so many people went. I mean, there are pictures just with hundreds of people and they look like they're having the best time. So they were very popular events. Kevin is still very good friends with this woman. And by all accounts, I mean, he was very well liked among all the people there. He was very charismatic. He was very friendly. But he was one of, hundreds of people who were going to these events. And, I think that they were for people sort of older than maybe 35, 40, who might have had young kids. They might have been newly divorced. They might be single, who wouldn't maybe have had an opportunity to go out and have fun without that.
So it was a networking group or social group that was targeted at single people and connections around that. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I would say a social group, very much towards single people, like people looking for love or fun, yeah. That's what I'd say.
And some of the people that we've spoken to met Kevin through mingles. He's so popular in that circle of friends and those connections that he has and so many loyal supporters. And then you look into other aspects of his past, like previous relationships, for example, his ex-wife. What did you make of her interview? I'll start with you, Patrick. Elise.
Yeah, look, that was an incredible interview, Ash. Well done for getting it. I heard somebody who was afraid. That was the takeaway for me. Somebody who, to this day, still feels afraid of that aspect of her life. She talked about a sort of Jekyll and Hyde character, if you like, somebody who was very charismatic and very charming, especially at the start of their relationship. And that's something that we've heard again and again. At the start of relationships, this man was a complete gentleman. He went out of his way to impress his partner of the time. But as the months went on and as the years went on, those partners would start seeing a very different side of Kevin, and that side terrified them. That's the common link. You have all these women who actually feel terrified to this day of Kevin, and it's like they got somebody, they're looking over their shoulders for the rest of their lives. That is the common link, I think. But relationships that started out very charming and very all-encompassing that went sour at some point.
And just on that, Elise, along with so many other brave women, have pushed through that fear to speak out. So that's very telling, do you think, Charlotte?
A lot of people who have come forward are people who have gone, I wasn't really sure whether to say anything, and now I'm going to. And of course, if they want their privacy respected, we respect that too. And they trust us to do that. The fact that they're willing to come out now, after the podcast has launched and tell these deeply personal stories and things, as Patrick said, that they're still quite afraid of, I think is that's really brave of them to do.
Just on that, we need to mention that Kevin Carell strenuously denies any allegations of domestic abuse levelled against him by his ex-wife, Elise. In these investigations, we have an email address. It's dearrachelle@news.com.au, and some days my jaw drops. I don't know how you guys are feeling, but what do you feel about when you check that email some days?
Yes, no, look, I look at it every day. I look forward to looking at it each morning. We've had dozens of people come through, and again, there's a common thread. They want to help. They actually want to help. And a lot of those emails begin with, I don't know if this is relevant, but, and then they tell a story that relates to some encounter they had or some understanding they had back from 20 years ago. And again, these are people who just want to see justice done. That's the driving force. And, you got some strange ideas in there at times, but you've also got people who say, look, I knew this person back then and this person was like this, and I just want to help. I just want to give you something. I don't know if it means anything. I want to give you something that goes to making this getting justice done. And that's what impresses me. And there's so many people every day. I look forward to it, as I said, just looking at those emails.
I love looking at the inbox. And as Patrick said, a lot of people go, I don't know if this is important, and usually those are the best ones. But even listeners sending us questions that they have, as journalists, it's part of our job to preempt what listeners will want to know. We have to ask those questions. And so getting people engaging with it, asking their own questions, it's not only super interesting from our perspective, but it's really important to get that kind of feedback, I guess.
And it's so great to know as well that the interest from our listeners and people that read your stories, that they are coming forward and they want to help, as you say, and that's what it's going to take, we believe, to get this solved, right? Some
of those tips that have come through have driven what we have reported and how the podcast has gone. And I think somebody out there knows something that breaks this open. All the police officers who have been part of this, everyone who's been part of it is of the belief that somebody or some people know things that actually steer this story. And some of those people, and I'm sure it'll be one of those as Charlotte was saying, sort of, I'm not sure if this will help, but it will be one of those tips that really could crack this wide open, I'm sure. And it's exciting. It's great to see it happening in real time and to see, the possibilities sort of, emerge in front of you each morning as you look at them.
Wouldn't that be incredible given the injustice that Anne and Christy have been dealt for so many years? We're just coming up to 24 years is the anniversary of Rachelle's brutal murder. And just to think what they've gone through over the years, what have you made of that? Going through the initial investigation and then the inquest and then the police appeals that just fell on deaf ears, and this campaign to increase the reward that for some reason it's still sitting there at $200,000, which is not a huge amount of money to someone who could potentially be risking relationships or risking their safety. They might fear for their safety to come forward with information. So where do you sit with the reward and why it hasn't been increased at all, Charlotte? I know you've been strongly looking into that one too.
Yeah, I can't really understand why the reward hasn't been raised. I mean, $200,000 was a lot of money back when Rachelle was murdered, but today it's not even a house deposit in Sydney, to be honest. And really the ones that work, the rewards that work are about $1 million. That is, you need someone to be able to give this information, uproot their lives potentially, and move somewhere else. And they need the funds to do that. So it would be a tremendous incentive if police raise the reward to about $1 million. I cannot imagine how taxing this has been for Rachelle's family to go through this for so long. The emotional investment, the energy, the pain that they go through, it's unimaginable.
In the course of our jobs, we deal with a lot of victims of crime, whether it's in court cases or, the Royal Commission into sexual abuse or whatever. And most of those people who are victims are scarred by what has happened to them, very understandably. They're bitter, they're angry, they're obsessed in ways that are perfectly relatable. And that's what struck me about Christy and Anne when I first met them. They are hurt for life by what happened to Rachelle, but it hasn't shaped them in that sort of ugly way that victims of crime are shaped. They laugh, they joke, they have fond memories of Rachelle, and all the way through, Graham Childs did most of the heavy lifting with the police, until he passed away. It was always constructive. He didn't get angry. He didn't throw tantrums. He just wanted justice, and it was this very sort of disciplined sort of need for justice that really got inherited by Christy in the same way. She wants this to happen. She needs for this to happen. But she doesn't get angry with the police. She hasn't shouted from the rooftops. She hasn't sort of, demanded things must happen in what it's all been sort of, can you please help us? We need to find an answer here. And I admire them. They are outstanding human beings because of the way they have handled such a long time, this missing part of their life. It was stolen from them. That they just want to understand why. And they do it in the most articulate and, warm sort of way. They are outstanding in that sense.
They're just remarkably dignified in their campaign for justice, and we all as a team, and it's a huge team, are fighting for that too. So everyone's contribution to this project is very greatly appreciated by myself, but mostly Christy and Anne and Team Shell, which is growing by the day, which is fantastic. Well, thank you both for joining me today on this special bonus episode of Dear Rachelle.
Pleasure, Ash.
Thank you.
New episodes of Dear Rachelle drop on Fridays. Visit dearrachelle.com.au for more. And if you have any information you want to share with me, Ashlea Hansen, you can do so confidentially. Please send an email to dearrachelle@news.com.au, or you can follow the Dear Rachelle podcast official discussion group on Facebook.